Hi, it's Gary. Welcome to today's video. End of June, time to wrap up the month of Moonman. So these pens, the Moonman pens, the Mahjong pens, they're what I've primarily used this month. I did have a little bit of a sidebar into some of my gold nibbed pens, but then I went back to Moonman. It's been an interesting month. I've actually learnt an awful lot about these pens this month. So join me now, down on the mat. Let's jump on in and start to rank these pens. Welcome down to the mat. Let's jump on in and see how I went in June of 2022. Position number 6 goes to this one. This is the Moonman C3. Now, I will be honest, I actually quite like the look of this pen. I like the fact that it's transparent. Yes, I use a converter with it. You can see that converter inside. Beauty with this pen, if you wanted to, you could just remove that converter. Let's just pull it out and you could eyedropper it. I think that would look really nice, especially with a nice bright coloured ink. Just pop the converter in so I don't lose it. As you can see, we've got an O-ring and we've got plenty of threads. I'd just put a little bit of silicone grease on those. So let's pop this back together. The nib on this pen, it's quite small, isn't it? It's, I think, a number 5 size nib. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've had quite a bad experience with this pen. I've had loads of flow issues. I've tried playing with the nib. I need to pull this nib out again and have another look at it. No matter what I did, I just couldn't get the ink to flow on a consistent manner. What I'd find is every couple of sentences, I'd have to stop because there'd be no ink coming out. I'd have to shake the pen. I've had to prime the feed a few times. Just really not a very nice experience. It could be if I eyedropper it. Maybe it's an issue to do with the converter. Don't know. But for this month, just haven't enjoyed it. Even when I've been writing, even when it's been getting it to write, it's not been a nice line. It's been too thin. I mean, yes, I know it's a fine nib, so I was expecting that. And again, now this is all down to personal preference. I prefer the broader nibs at the moment. So finding this quite frustrating. For all these reasons though, this pen, it comes in at position number 6. So this was the Moonman C3. Let me just move the paper up slightly now. There we go. Now we can see all the remaining pens. Position number 5. I had to think about this one. It's been a bit of a consistent theme this month that I've had issues with flow. There's only one pen that hasn't, and that will be the pen that comes in at number 1. Because one of the criteria for me, if it's not got ink coming through, it means you're not able to write. So what use is the actual pen? So at position number 5, after a lot of humming and hawing, a lot of heartbreak went into this, I've decided to give that to the Moonman M800 with the Moonman nib. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know the Moonman M800 is one of my favourite pens. So it always hurts when I'm giving it a low score. I love the colour of this pen. Just look at this blue chatoyancy here. Just going to slowly turn this around. I think in terms of looks, this should be number 1. If I take the cap off, it fits nice in my hand. In terms of hand feel, it's nice. It's up there with the best of them. It's another pen. It's a cartridge converter. This one's actually just run out of ink this morning, which is why I still haven't cleaned it out. But it's metal fittings, so it's not something you could really eyedropper. I would love to see this pen in a piston version or a vacuum filler, or even just an eyedropper version. I think it would be, to me, virtually a perfect pen then. Why is this at number 5 then? I hear you all screaming that question out. It's to do with flow. As I said with the previous pen, I've had major issues with flow this month. Now, I don't think it's weather related because we're now in winter. So we're getting temperatures of between 10 and 14, 15 most days. So we're not talking that it's hot. It's not overly cold, so I don't think that the ink is getting too cold. It's not been overly humid. There hasn't been much problems with the weather at all. So I'm struggling to put it down to being a weather-related issue. And I know I do see a lot of that in the summer. With this, it's not as bad as the C3. I'd maybe get 3 or 4 sentences before it would run out. So for a standard A5 piece of paper, what I was finding is I'd have to shake the pen, occasionally prime the feed, but I'd have to do that maybe 3 or 4 times per page. So again, not a perfect example, not something I can just pick up and write with. So in terms of this in comparison with the rest of the pens for this month, I'm afraid this comes in at number 5. So this is the Moonman M800 with the Moonman fine nib. Position number 4. Again, had to think about this long and hard. Position number 4 goes to the Moonman M800, this time in purple. Now, the difference between the two pens, obviously the colour is different. You know, and if we turn this around, I think this is quite a pretty pen. It looks quite nice. I like here where we've got the toy and seam, we've got all these blacks as well. This has got a Bock nib on it. Just see if I can get that not to roll. There we go. I'm just going to fetch in the other one. The other one has a Moonman nib. So that's really the only difference between the two pens is the nib manufacturer. There we go. Now, pop that one away. Again, nice pen. Love using the M800s. They're such a perfect fit to my hand. And they're what led me in to buying my Leonardos, and that led me into buying other Italian pens, and that's a completely different story. The Bock nib, it does make a difference, but you pay for it. When I bought these pens, as you can see from the prices, I was $35 for the Moonman nib against $52 for the Bock nib. Big difference in price. Yes, the writing experience was nicer. The nib, it is actually a lot smoother. Now I can work on the other Moonman. I can soon fix that. That's not a big problem. I can just get my repair kit out and do a bit of smoothing. So I can easily work on the nib. But out of the box, that Bock nib was a lot smoother. It's a number 6 nib, same with the other Moonman, which is really nice because it means I can swap the nibs. On some of my other M800s, I have swapped the nibs. So I've got a green version, which has now got a Goulet broad Yoho nib on it. Wow, that pen's like a dream. I haven't had that in this month's rotation, purely because I already had 2 M800s. I love this pen. I love writing with this pen. In terms of flow, I have had a couple of issues. Nowhere near as much as I was getting with the Moonman nib, but I was still finding a couple of times on each A5 page, I would need to give the pen a shake to get it to write again. Now, not sure if that's related to the ink. That's something I need to experiment with. As you can see, at the start of the month, I had Noodlers Matahari's Cordial. I only had a little bit of a sample left. So my first day of using this pen, it ran out. I've got to be honest with you. I love the colour of this Matahari's Cordial. I love the name, but I think the colour is really nice. It's like a dusty pink colour. I then put Diamine Violet in there. Usually Diamine inks I don't really have too much of an issue with. As I say, I need to explore a bit because I haven't used this pen that much, so I need to get some different inks in to see if the issue is maybe with the feed, it might be with the nib, could be with the converter. Too many variables at the moment, but I was still getting those issues with the flow. It means I have to mark it down. And for this month, that means it comes in at position number 4. So this is the Moonman M800 with the Bock nib. So we're getting into the last 3. And now it's getting a little bit more difficult to make the decisions about what should be at what place. The number 1 pen, that was an easy decision. This number 2 and 3, they kept swapping and changing between the two. What I've decided though, at position number 3, that goes to the Mahjong or the Moonman T5. I like this pen. Just going to slowly turn this around. Hopefully the colours will come over to you. It's quite a dark background on the pen. But then we've got this gorgeous purple colour with it. Can you see that there's stripes as well where the purple is more vibrant? I think it looks really nice. This pen is a piston filler. It's got a nice ink window as well. I like the ink window. I'd like to see it a little bit bigger because old man eyes, sometimes I struggle. But it's fairly usable. There's still ink in here. Now this is one of the things that I find with piston fillers. One fill lasts me an awful long time. It just keeps going and going and going. I really like it. The ink in here is Cult Pen's Little Pip, and it's got a nice gold sheen. Hopefully that will come over there on the camera. Now I'm just going to move this down slightly to the title. The titles, they're written in the same ink, but written by a 1.5 nib in Alami AL. And look at this here, we've got gorgeous gold sheen there. And this does come out in the writing of this pen. I do notice a lot of gold sheen coming out. Even on my cheaper paper, I've still seen that. There's just one little last go with that. Again, I've had some flow issues. When it writes, it's a really nice wet writer. I really enjoy using it. It puts down a really nice line. It's a medium nib, but it's a nice generous nib. But I've still had issues where that after a couple of pages, it would start to play up. The flow issues would come in. Once they start playing up, every page or so, I'd have to give it a shake. Not a major issue. It's still nice to use. Just got to be aware of that limitation. So if I'm going to be doing lots of pages, just need to agitate it every so often. That keeps it going. Now, part of me says, Gary, is that to do with the ink? It's a sheen in ink. Is that affecting the way that the ink's flowing? So what I'm going to be doing is, once this runs out, I'm not going to empty it. I'm going to wait for it to run out. I've got another purple ink I can try in there. Maybe Diamine Violet, could be Diamine Mondobo's hat or Monbodo's hat. I can never remember which way to pronounce that one. They're nice purple inks, so I'm going to try them in there. And they're not sheen in ink, so hopefully if it is an issue with the sheen, that might come out a little bit. I've enjoyed using this pen though. I think this is really nice. It's a real nice fit in my hand. Now, I haven't had this pen overly long. By overly long, maybe 3 months. I do intend to buy the other pens in this series though, because I really like it. It's another pen, number 6 nib. I like that this is just that silver colour. I think it's a really gorgeous looking pen. But as I say, I had to mark it. So when I was looking at all this, it had to have that flow issue come in. And that's the only reason that this comes in at position number 3. If I'd have got rid of that flow issue, that would have been a definite, well, it might have even been a contender for number 1. So this is the Mahjong or the Moonman T5. Position number 2. Let me just move this paper so we can see, hopefully, both the pens listed there. So I'm down to a choice of 2 pens. The Moonman M600S or the Moonman or Mahjong A1. Position 2 for this month. That ended up going to the Moonman M600S. This is not the one you would buy if you went and bought one from AliExpress or eBay or wherever you source your Moonman pens from. Yes, it's the same colour. I think this is really nice. I love the... I'm going to call it green. The actual name of it is blue. And yes, I can see a lot of blue in it. But to me, I don't know why, I always think of this as green. It's a duofold style pen, so we've got the black end caps. Let's take this off. This is where we've got the difference. The nib on here. This is not the Moonman nib. This is a Kaigaloo long knife nib. It's a bit like a small architect grind. And this to me is what makes this an outstanding pen. I love it. It's really nice. It gives a slightly unusual line, which you can see here. And to me, that all adds character to my writing. There's not a big difference. It's not something that jumps out at you, but it's enough that I'm aware that it's there. It's another pen. It's a cartridge converter. There's not a lot of ink left in this. This may run out in the next day or so. So I'm going to carry on using this. In fact, I might even only get a page out of it because there doesn't seem to be much ink in there at all. But that doesn't matter. I've really enjoyed this. And I've enjoyed the Robert Oster Spearmint. It's only a sample, and I think I've still got a tiny little bit left, which I may try in a different pen. So this is a sample. I've had it about 18 months, and it's one of the ones where it's been sat there, and I keep thinking to myself, Gary, you've got to try this out. But then I reach for Robert Oster Tranquility, or I'll reach for Diamine Aurora Borealis, which are 2 inks I really like using. So I thought to myself, come on, this is meant to be a greenish pen. Let's use it. I like the colour match. I think that looks really nice together. I actually quite like this ink. I see a lot of character in my writing. combination obviously with the nib. I've got a little bit of this sample left in my tube, so I might try and get that into another pen in the next few months. But this comes in at position number 2. So this is the Moonman M600S with that Kaigaloo long knife nib. I'm going to just reposition the paper ever so slightly. There we go. That means, by process of elimination, the number 1 pen for June of 2022 goes to the Moonman or Mahjong A1. This pen is a clicky pen. There we go. I love it. It's not something I would really sit in a meeting with because that is quite a loud click. People are going to be able to hear it, and I've got to be honest, and I don't know about you, but it really annoys me when you hear people clicking their pens in a meeting. This pen, it's been a surprise. If you'd have asked me at the start of the month when I'd have brought this in, because this is a very new pen to me, I've only had it maybe a month or so, I'd have said to you, well, it's an extra fine nib. That's all it comes with, is an extra fine nib. I don't think it's going to be that nice. At the moment, I'm not really into extra fine nib. I find them really scratchy and drag on the page. Wow, this one shocked me. This is such a smooth nib. It writes well on every paper I've used it on. Now, I've used it on Tomoe River, I've used it on Rhodia, on Oxford. This is Oxford optic paper. I've used it on Ayush paper. I've used it on cheap paper from the printer. All works really nicely. It's a really enjoyable pen. The ink in here is by Diamine and it's Oxford Blue. Now this ink, it did run out partway through the month, so I went to replace it, and I was going to keep the same ink because I really do like this Diamine Oxford Blue. And I did my normal, stuck the pen into the bottle, worked on the converter. I'm using the converter in this. Do you know, no ink came into the converter. When I looked at it, the converter was broken. It's literally come apart and I just can't get it back together. Now, luckily, I've got a number of Pilot Con 40 converters, and that converter looks identical to that Moonman one. So all I did was put a Con 40 in there, filled perfectly. In the last 2 weeks, whilst it's had that Con 40 in there, had no issues with it leaking. So I think the converters are more or less identical in shape. That fixed the issue. I do need to keep an eye on it though, because I wonder if the issue with causing this breakage is to do with the clicking mechanism, maybe putting too much pressure on here. That's something I have to watch out for. So that's a long-term test I'll do, and I'll do a follow-up video, most probably in a few months' time, after I've had a chance to really experiment and play around with it. Just going to now take this broken converter, that's going in the bin. I've had it sat on the side of my desk waiting to do this video with. I can now get rid of it. Really enjoyed working with this, and it's been such a consistent pen. No flow issues. It's a nice feel in the hand. There we go. I like the roll stop rather than the clip. I know this is very heavily inspired by, if not maybe even a copy, of a Pilot Vanishing Point, and that's where it's got the clip down at the bottom. And that's the only thing which is really putting me off getting a Vanishing Point. I don't know how I'll get with that clip down there, but this roll stop, I'm really enjoying that. The only thing which really puts me off with this pen is the nib. It's only extra fine. I'd love to be able to get this in abroad. What I may end up doing is actually getting a Vanishing Point, because the Vanishing Point nib units do fit in this pen. I've seen other YouTubers show videos of that. So there's a possible compromise there. But I'd love if Mahjong would do some different nib sizes to go along with this model. But for all that, this comes in at position number 1. So this is the Mahjong or the Moonman A1. So let's turn over the page and we'll look at the other pen that I've brought in and used this month. I've only had the one additional pen this month, and that's the Moonman P135. This has got a fine nib. In there I put Diamine All the Best. This is a sheen and a shimmer ink. Not the best decision to put it into a fine nibbed pen though. We can see here, someone did ask on my YouTube shorts about drying times. So we've got an immediate swipe, after 10 seconds, after 30 seconds, and after a minute. So a moderately quick drying ink. I like this combo. I think the pen and the ink, they look really nice together. As I say, it's got a fine nib. So not seeing too much in the way of sheen or shimmer. Do see little bits though, so there is some there. Just going to see if I can catch that. I don't know if it comes through on this one, but on the D and parts of that Moonman word, I do see some of that blue shimmer coming through. This pen is fairly small. Look at the size of my hand. I personally find it quite uncomfortable to use. Can I post it? Well, yes, the cap goes on, but a couple of shakes and it comes off. So not really a good posting pen. So I have to use this unposted. For quick notes, for maybe 2 or 3 sentences, it's not too bad. But for any longer sessions, I'm really not happy with this. It's got a fairly small nib, so it's a number 5 size nib. It's got a converter, which I've just managed to pull out. Not had that happen before, but you can actually feel it catching on the inside of the pen. So I must have just caught it as I was pulling it out. The section, again, bit on the short side. It's still enjoyable. If I had to rank it, it would have been maybe number 3 or 4 this month. So it's certainly not as awkward as the C3, but I do think it does beat them 2 M800s as well. So this is the Moonman P135. Just going to swap over. We'll take one final look at the pens. So here are the pens that I was using during June of 2022. Position 6, the Moonman C3. Number 5 goes to the Moonman M800 with the Moonman nib. Number 4, Moonman M800 with the Bock nib. Number 3, the Mahjong or Moonman T5. Number 2, the Moonman M600S with the Kaigaloo long knife nib. Position number 1, that went to the Mahjong or the Moonman A1. And then my other pen was the Moonman P135. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. What are your thoughts on Moonman pens? Do you have any of these? Are your thoughts different? Have you found different issues with them? Please drop a comment down below. Let's kickstart the conversation. Please hit that thumbs up button every time you like, every time you comment. Just helps with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you can get new videos as I release them. I'll talk to you again soon.